I'm Josh Podeska. I'm Chief Data Scientist with Domino. Started just about a month ago, so I'm excited to be on this Domino journey, and I look forward to getting to know more of you in this role as we interact together. Very excited about the panel we have here together today. Three great individuals that have a lot of deep experience in data science management, and we're really hoping that we get a lot of feedback from the audience. We're going to have two folks with microphones roaming around. Are those mics already ready? Raise your hands if you're there. If not, we'll get them in a minute. Up here? Okay. Can I ask one of you to come over here and one over there? Because I'll start with a seed question, but then if you guys want to take it from there, we'll just take your questions. And if you don't have questions, I got a book full, so we'll keep it going. But let me start by doing introductions. We have Patrick Phelps, Michelangelo D'Agostino, and Connor Jensen. Gentlemen, you want to introduce yourselves, starting with Patrick?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Patrick Phelps. I am the lead data scientist right now at Insight Data Science. It's a small startup that's been around quite a while. We've placed over 1,000 working data scientists in the companies. And prior to this, I led monetization data science at Pinterest. I founded that team and built it out for them. And prior to that, I led data science as a function at Yelp. So I've done a few different hats, and I'm really excited to sort of have discussion with all of you and hopefully provide insight.
I'm Connor Jensen. Currently, I do data and analytics career coaching, small startup called Data Science. Prior to this, I've been a data and analytics executive at a couple of commercial insurance companies over the last decade. Prior to that, I was a weather forecaster for the U.S. Air Force for a few years.
Hey everybody, I'm Michelangelo D'Agostino. Like many data scientists, I had kind of a winding path into data science. I started machine learning across the bay at Berkeley in a physics PhD program, did some postdoc research, and then in 2011 left to go work on the Obama re-election campaign, doing voter behavior prediction, digital optimization, things like that. And then since then I've been starting and leading data science teams in companies kind of on the scale of 100, 200 people in sort of the startup industry broadly. So was at a payments company called Braintree for a while. I started the data science team there. They're now part of PayPal. And then spent almost 4 years at a company called Civis Analytics, which spun out of the Obama campaign to do data science software and consulting. Eventually kind of inherited a team of about 20 data science R&D folks. And then now have just started a new team of data scientists at a company called ShopRunner, where we do kind of e-commerce and retail related work.
Great. Cool. Thanks, guys. Before we jump into the questions, as a group, we wanted to know a little bit about where you're at and what you're wanting to get out of this session. So we have just a couple questions for you. If you raise your hand in the affirmative, if this describes you. Are you currently managing a data science team? Show of hands, please. That is a lot of people. All right. Thank you. Next question. If your hand did not go up, are you open to managing a data science team sometime in the future in your career? All right, that might cover everybody. And a third question, which is separate from the other two. Are you looking to start a data science team? So just a few of those. Okay, great. Thank you for that feedback. All right, gentlemen, first question. So we know that data science, and we've heard this from a couple of our presenters previously, has a very high turnover in the field. I think we saw a statistic, the average tenure is less than 2 years. So how do you manage, keep, and grow that data science talent as a data science manager and as a leader? And with all of these answers, I'm sure everyone would appreciate any battle scars you've been through as well as successes. So share both of them with us if you could. Connor, you want to start?
Okay, sure. So battle scars, sure, right? I mean, I've hired and managed a few dozen data scientists across the years, and at one point we probably had 50% turnover within a year of a team of about 50. So it was a pretty brutal one. Some of the keys I think that I've discovered, or maybe even rediscovered after having managed kind of previous to data science, one of them is really selling the role at the organization that's actually going to be done. I think a lot of times we get very excited about what we're going to accomplish as data scientists or as new data science functions, and we can get a little ahead of ourselves in selling what we think we're going to do. So I think being very realistic upfront about what the role is, what the pain is going to be, what we really think the impact is going to be, and what that timeline looks like, especially in the corporate setting. Very few things happen quickly. So if you expect to come in as a brand new data scientist and a year from now you've got 8 new models that you've deployed on your resume and whatnot, it's not likely to happen. So some of that context setting. And the other one, and I think that this is true of managing no matter what you're managing, is really understanding the motivations of each individual on your team, because different people are driven by different things. And taking that time to really sit down, understand why they're there, what do they want to get out of it, what drives them and what kind of rewards work for them is really important. And I think we sometimes underestimate it. I think that we all get excited about the work. We're like, we're going to build models and that is its own reward. Which is true, but is not necessarily enough. We'll, call it necessary, but not sufficient, right? So taking that time to really get to know the data scientists, understand what drives them, making sure that you're doing your best to get them the projects that are interesting, as well as the recognition that they would like to have.
Great, thanks.
Maybe just to echo on your first point. So I always make it a point now when I interview people, prospective members of the team, is I always give them a real world example of the kind of things the team is looking at, and I stress the problems we're encountering. Because if you do a false sell, maybe you're like, we're going to do all these exciting things, and we're going to use deep learning eventually. What you get is a lot of people who feel they didn't get what they were buying into. And you'd rather have people who really want the problems you truly have and want to work on those than people who might seem excited but have different career goals.
Sure.
So I think that's really important. I think also, I think really getting to know your reports as people and also giving them really positive reinforcement. Data science can be a discipline of failures, right? Like a lot of the times what we experiment with fails. Models fail, processes fail, data sources turn out to be terrible after you suspect they were good. And just helping people understand this is a process. Your career is not built today, it is not built tomorrow, it is not built this week. It is built over the series of the next several years. It is built through doing things that truly impact the company, not things that create blog posts, for instance.
I think a lot of the things I've seen go wrong in retaining good data scientists kind of center around learning, actually, and opportunities for continuing to learn. And I think there have been 2 different manifestations. So one is a mistake that executives often make when they try to start a new data science team from scratch, and that is maybe they hire someone right out of academia, or they hire a very junior person where it's their first job, and then that person might be fine for a while, but after a while they become really unhappy because they don't feel like they have anyone around them that they can learn from. There's not someone who is more experienced, who's done these things before, and they pretty soon become disillusioned and start to look for other jobs where they can get actual mentorship. So if you're starting a new team, I think as hard as it is, it's important to get a leader in place before you start to hire folks onto the team. And then the second piece is around existing teams. Not everything we do as data scientists is sexy. Actually, most of the stuff we do is probably not all that fun and that exciting. Not every company is doing super cutting edge stuff all of the time. And so, that's sort of another reason why I see a lot of people leaving or thinking about leaving jobs. They think I'm not actually doing anything cool in my current job. I'm not learning anything new. And so I found there are often really simple things you can do to try to mitigate some of that. So things like, at Civis, we had a great culture of having a weekly journal club where people would pick papers and sit over lunch and talk about them, so they felt like they were getting exposed to some of that cutting edge research stuff. Or having hack time, occasional day here and there, or actually if you can dedicate a week, half a year or something like that, where people can actually work on learning a new software framework or trying some new computational technique. That gives the people the sense that they're actually learning something, even if their day-to-day job isn't always doing the most cutting-edge stuff.
So I'm going to piggyback one other comment on that. So I recently had a data scientist who I've worked with for a number of years, who I found out was looking for a new job, and I kind of said, why? He said, well, I'm bored, I'm not doing anything, this isn't as challenging as I wanted it to be. And I kind of sat and I said, well, I've given you 2 or 3 massive projects. I gave you big problems that we needed to do, and you haven't actually solved any of them. He says, well, I didn't know what to do. I said, okay. Part of that was on me for not really sitting down with him and taking the time to say, I've thought, I go, hey, I want to solve a big problem that's big and interesting to me. He didn't have the skill set to take that big problem chunk it into manageable problems that could then become data science solutions. Because it wasn't, here's the model that I need you to build for me, because he can do that a million times better than I can. When I gave him this problem, he couldn't kind of disaggregate it the right way. And so when I kind of sat down with him and I gave him that feedback and I said, we have problems, we have large scale problems that we could work on, and I've given them to you and you've just kind of like let them fall to the wayside, there's a lot that can be learned that is not always, well, what's a different algorithm I could be trying, or what's a new software package that's out that I, read about and, read the last Katie Nuggets and I should be doing this or I should be doing that. There's always a lot of stuff to learn, and sometimes we need to do a better job, I think, of framing for the people on the team where those opportunities are to learn, growing that domain expertise, growing that business kind of translator. Every data scientist should have some of that. I think there's a role for that data translator that's come up a couple times today, but as data scientists, that's a part of your function, whether or not that's your main thing. So,
Great, thanks guys. Some really good insight about culture. Questions? Let's see if we have any from the audience so far.
Hi, Alejandro Cantarero. I run data for a company known as the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, newspapers, fun stuff. Curious, I think for most people in this room, since there's some people that manage data scientists, I think we all know that you can have communication challenges with them and the other stakeholders they have to work with, and that can cause a lot of friction in them, suddenly feeling they don't want to be at the company anymore. So just curious about anything you have about that.
So I can maybe start on one thing I did at Yelp that was really successful. So Yelp had a culture that was very centralized in terms of how the data science team was organized. It still is organized that way. It worked very closely with engineering teams. So like a single data scientist or maybe two would work with an engineering team. And there'd be a product manager on that engineering team. And often it was the product manager who was sort of trying to gauge, could we build them products that could be integrated and be successful? And I noticed a problem where data scientists on my team would build really great things, and then the product manager would get them and be like, this is really cool, but this isn't really solving the thing I wanted you to do. And after debugging that a few times, what I found was simply in the first meeting, or in a series of meetings, the product manager would say something, and the data scientist would be like, oh yeah, that's really cool, we can do that. And then they'd leave the room, and then like 2 weeks would go by, and they'd meet again, and they'd be like, yeah, we're making great progress on this really cool thing, but they never really re-articulate the problem. And so I started a thing where, what we called sort of ask me a question, where the first time a data scientist works with a product manager on a new project, they had to sit in a room together for an hour, and it would literally be that the product manager would state what they want, and the data scientist had to restate to them what they think they were saying, and in a way that they could actually tackle, because often questions could be ambiguous. And it was amazing that people were like, there's no way this can fill an hour. And yet, you can fill an hour literally reiterating the same question and being like, are we really agreeing on what we're saying? And people loved it. The product managers were just amazed by this. They thought it was the best thing ever. The data scientists were really skeptical, and then they were like, wow, I went in for an hour and was completely wrong on what I thought they were asking. And so it was actually really effective. And after that, it really built stronger ties, and we stopped shipping products that didn't align with what Yelp actually needed.
I think the short answer is just maybe more, right? More communication rather than less, in defining the problem, in sharing the solution that you have, or even when you're encountering issues on the project itself, on the data, on unclarity around questions, like data scientists aren't always the most outgoing people. I don't know, maybe. So a little bit of that forcing mechanism to say, let's make sure, have you checked in with your business partner? Have you checked in with the stakeholder for this project? We need to be pushing that and forcing that a little bit, because it can be a little too much, okay, I got my problem and I'm gonna go off and solve it for 3 months and then come back and do it. I would also force data scientists to leave their laptops behind when we'd go to meetings. And have had like knockdown, drag out fights with some of them about it, because they were like, well, I don't find any value in going to the meeting, so I'm gonna bring my laptop so that I can code during the meeting. That's a coaching discussion that happens right after that. So, kind of forcing that more communication, I think, helps that.
Yeah, I think there are also some like informal things that you can do to kind of like evangelize data science that helps sort of bridge some of those gaps as well. So like some of the things I mentioned earlier about having journal clubs, like I found that engineers and product managers love to come to these lunchtime discussions because they're interested in data science, and it forces more of these like impromptu conversations where they're maybe talking about something the data scientist is excited about, and it just helps communication like down the road, maybe on a project. Similar, like, I'll have data scientists give brown bag talks about things that they're working on or about other kinds of basics of data science, and that again helps product managers and engineers to understand some of that stuff better. And then the other thing I think is just sending data scientists out. So if you're in an organization with like an engineering culture and they have regular stand-ups, like sending data scientists out to different teams stand-ups regularly so that they hear things that they might not have heard otherwise, they pick up on little things, they can contribute feedback. Just like little informal things like that often start to improve the two-way communication, I think.
Great, thank you. Yeah, but a couple more questions, here we go.
Yeah, my name is Brian Holligan. I work at States Title, and we're a small 3-person team, and this question is about hiring. We put together a hiring process that involves one of those cruel take-home challenges that takes the candidate way too much time and forces them to do a full model build. And we're looking to kind of get off of that, but it's been tough because we feel like we get a lot of value out of looking at all the work that they produce in that process. And I was just curious if you guys have had any success in assessing candidates without forcing them to do sort of a take-home challenge, or if you have any recommendations for how to approach that without ruining people's weekends.
I do have a good suggestion, which I take no credit for. So this was entirely designed by my previous team. So we had a similar problem. So we had a take-home assessment. I think it was even pretty rigidly timed. And our concern actually was that it was pre-screening people out. The market is hot, and so people are like, F this, I'm not going to take this exam. I'll go take some other job. And so we actually shifted it to be, there were, I think, 2 things that were key. One was not making it so time-bound. Like we told people, spend about 4 hours on this, but we're going to, you can spread it out something like a week or 2 before you actually come on site. And then the second thing was that we moved it to, we already knew we wanted to bring this person into the office, and they would do this coding exercise and then bring it with them to coming into the office for the interview. And then it became part of one of the interview sessions. Like we would look at the code, we would talk through it with them, we would ask them follow-up questions, and it became almost like a informal code review kind of thing. And I think that worked really well because I agree. I think like maybe with the exception of someone who has a lot of code on their public GitHub, like you really do learn a lot by seeing someone's code, like a whole lot when you actually see someone's code. And so if you can do it in a way that's like a little bit more friendly and doesn't feel like an actual test that they have to pass, I found that valuable.
By the way, we don't have to answer all the questions.
Right.
If people in the audience have good hints or tricks, feel free to add them in.
Yeah,
True. Yeah, true.
My minor comment to that is we didn't do data challenges at Yelp. We didn't do them at Pinterest. We don't do them at Insight. I have successfully hired and interviewed hundreds of people at this point. Interviewed thousands of people. The main reason we don't do data challenges is it's really hard to scale if they actually get it right. Okay, like when you give them a real problem, it takes a huge amount of time to grade the data challenge, and I'd rather just put a good data scientist on my team in a room with them for an hour and not even spend the data scientist on the team already, spend 4 hours trying to be like, well, their approach wasn't quite what I would have done, but it's okay. It might be valid in certain circumstances. They didn't really explain this thing. Maybe they're okay to bring on site. Like that, it just didn't help in our experience.
Yeah, and that's my experience as well. Is we didn't do data challenges at any of the companies that I've run teams. We would do a technical interview, and that was usually a really good opportunity actually for some of the junior members on the team to get involved in the recruiting process and get kind of start to get them a little bit more integrated in some of that recruiting and be involved, which was good in its own right. But ask some technical questions. See, maybe like throw them like little code snippet type things that, even like whether it's typing or freeform on the whiteboard, whatever. A lot of times I'm more interested in, how are they taking the business problem and turning it into an analytical problem. That was often more of a challenge for us than the actual coding itself. So that was something that was easily testable in the room.
Great. Thanks for the question. Here we go, one right here.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Robin, and I'm currently leading the tech and product team in one of the startups in Indonesia. My question for you guys will be, how do you actually identify, just now the question was about hiring, maybe just general data science people. But I also had the panel just now mentioned that we gotta have a lead whom the junior people can learn from as well. So if we are actually looking to hire lead data scientists, how can we identify a good lead data scientist? And also, the second question will be, have you guys experienced hiring the wrong person? And how would you want to actually fight from that? Yeah, just sharing on that. Yeah. Thank you.
So let me answer the second question first. I've absolutely hired the wrong person.
That's the funny
Me too, yeah.
At every level. Making the wrong decision for a data science manager is crippling. We hired one person who I'm not the final decision maker, but I gave him my seal of approval, and he decimated a team in 6 months. That I talked about that year where we had 50% turnover. His team had 80% turnover. So hiring the wrong person can be crippling. In terms of what to look for, there is no simple answer. It's probably
what was wrong with that particular individual? What did not jive? What didn't fit with your
And
culture?
where are they now?
Yeah. How do I say this the right? So there was a couple
Turn off
things.
the recording real quick.
So a couple of things, a couple of big challenges. One was that this person did not listen to their team members, and they did not take feedback. They didn't take feedback from me or we were peers, or the person who was the head of the group. They did not listen and did not take feedback in, right? They gave all of the appearance of it, but then would do the exact same thing over and over again. That was I think the number one challenge, because then any of the other flaws that they had never got fixed. They just kept repeating it over and over again. That was probably the critical flaw. They had all the right markers, right? They had the right resume, they had the right skill set and all the stuff. But that inability to listen was crucial. And that's actually one of the things that I look for data scientists or managers or any of those levels, is that curiosity and that desire to learn. That's a thing that I probe really, really hard for in the interview process and looking at what they've done and why they've done what they've done. If they think they know everything, I don't want to work with them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think I was going to say before you said that, I think humility is one of the really important characteristics, especially for someone who's going to be in charge, because they have to know that they don't have all the good ideas. In fact, they have a very small minority of the good ideas, and that they don't know all the answers. Obviously they have some experience and they have some answers, and they can help folks on the team debug, or they can make a wise suggestion here or there. But most of the ideas and the good technical solutions will come from people on the team, and if they don't have humility to recognize that, it's going to be a problem. So that's where a lot of kind of behavioral style interview questions can be helpful, asking people experiences they had on a team where something went wrong, and what went wrong, and how would you avoid that in the future, and look for a genuine answer, not one of these I tried too hard, or one of these answers that's not really an answer, where someone can actually answer the question showing that they have some ability for self-reflection, I think.
Yeah, my one minor thing would be, I completely agree. It's all about listening and humility in your manager, because if you have that, everything else is fixable. But what we would do at Yelp is we specifically, for people who are going to come into these roles, we'd arrange what we call was a learning interview. So in this, we would specifically choose someone at the company who had some skill that they clearly didn't have, and we shouldn't expect them to have. It could be something about data architecture, it could be something about just Java runtime compilation, these sorts of things. And we would send an expert in that basically to give them an interview. And the first question in the interview would just be, well, what do you know about this topic? And the correct answer was essentially nothing, right? But would the candidate say that, right? Sometimes candidates won't. But then also, basically that entire interview was just the expert we had would try and teach them about this thing. And say, can you go in a situation where you're really uncomfortable, where you don't really know what you're doing, work with someone who is an expert, and come out at the end where the expert feels like you listened, you learned, you applied maybe some other things that were tangential you already knew, and they would be super happy working with you, even if it was outside the area of expertise.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, that's
I like
really
that.
good idea. I like that. I have used the reverse strategy before, which is take someone non-technical and have the person try to explain a concept to them, and it's huge red flags if you ever make that person feel stupid, or like, you can't explain it in such a way that they can understand it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, those are both great tactics. I like them. In the back.
Hi, John Gates from Climate Corporation across the street. It seems like this topic that we're on right now is also amenable to data science solutions, especially if you can track performance over time of hired candidates. Of course, you can't track the performance of not hired candidates, so that's always a difficulty. But I'm just curious if you've seen any best practices or at least nice examples of folks that are attempting to do this.
So HR analytics.
I have not.
Have you eat your own dog food with that at all? No?
At Civis, we got tons and tons of applications and interviewed lots of people, and we had aspirations to do that, to go back and look through our applicants and try to do an analysis like that, but I don't think that we ever actually did.
Yeah.
I've never had the scale of the data to do it from a data science perspective. I've seen HR analytics done in other, like when I worked for Starbucks, they do a lot there. The places that I've seen do this the best by far, though, are some of the management consulting firms. BCG, man, they do this and they do it amazingly well. So there are definitely companies out there. I've never seen something, if the sample size is big enough in data science, that I've seen it done to the scale of picking good data scientists.
I mean, like at Yelp and Pinterest, like performance is obviously tracked for people we did hire. It's really hard to know for the people you didn't hire for a lot of reasons, including their privacy, obviously. One thing I will say on sort of tracking performance is don't make it like a quarterly review that you track or these sorts of things. Like if you're a manager and you are having one-on-ones, you should be using a template to basically keep track of like, what did you talk about? What did they bring up? What was sort of the objectives? What were the action items we got out of this one-on-one for every one-on-one, right? Because like what you want to know, even when you do the quarterly review or the yearly review is, did they take feedback? Did they work with partners? Like all these little points that you just won't remember. So I just recommend really granular and that's work for the manager, but that's kind of your job as the manager, right? Like
And that should be good input into your hiring process. I've just never done it using data science tools.
So I want to personalize this a little bit. I'm just curious to hear, you guys have all been very successful, have great experience, and you're also very humble. So maybe set the humility aside just for a moment. I want to hear maybe some of the secret sauce of your success. Like what do you guys think you do differently? Maybe some atypical lessons or best practices that you do. And the second part, if I could, when you go to work on Monday morning, I'm curious this next Monday morning, like what's the biggest thing on your radar or your mindset?
Sure, I'll start out. I'm dumb as a brick, and I admit it. That's kind of what sets me apart. That's
actually going to be my answer.
I'm pretty good at asking the stupid questions. And it turns out that oftentimes people won't ask stupid questions because they think people will think I'm stupid if I ask this question, right? But a lot of times asking very basic questions is a good way to find where very basic problems hide. And once you get comfortable doing that and being like, I'm going to look like a freaking idiot when I ask this question, but I just have to ask it, is really powerful. And the normal way I do this is I say, so this is going to be a really naive question, but, for instance, where was this data logged to begin with, right? And I have seen data scientists go way off the rails with that question alone. Similarly, like if I just ask, like, this is a naive question, why do we care about advertising clicks, right? Like I joined an ads team, I founded an ads team, I knew nothing about ads at that time. And so like, I just am comfortable being an idiot. That's sort of my strategy. That's a good one.
Yeah, actually that was gonna be a part of my answer as well. I think that like, you often ask the dumbest question and you just pull on a little thread and all of a sudden some huge thing unravels and it turns out like no one understands a big thing. I think that's really kind of important. I think the other thing I think that has been part of my success is just the ability to learn new things quickly. Like this field changes very, very quickly and there are so many different aspects of it that like no one person can know all the different things. And so just like reading as widely as you can, like you're not gonna be an expert in all of these things, but if you have kind of like a high level understanding or you understand where something is going, you can then figure out where there might be an application for something and then go deeper in it if you need to, but trying to just learn as much as possible and like always be reading as much as possible constantly.
I've failed a lot, right? And I think that I pick myself up. I look back and I figure out why I failed and what I did wrong. And I try not to do that again. And I think that that's one of the things that, I like to try new things a lot, and I, don't succeed at, any number of them. But I'm always trying something new, and I'm not afraid to fail. I shouldn't say that. That's probably over dramatizing it, right? Like, it sucks. It sucks to fail. And I've done it enough to have, be okay with the failure as long as I learn from it, right? And that's I think the key thing for me is if I screw up, if I drop the ball, if something doesn't go wrong, take the time, stop, look back at it, learn from whatever happened, and go make new mistakes and make new failures. The other thing that I think that I spend a lot of, I read as much or more stuff around like organizational behavior and organizational psychology and thinking about people as I do about tech at this point in time, if not more, to be honest. I'd say my math and my stats textbooks get cracked far less often than they used to, and I spend a lot of time thinking about, not only thinking about the people around me, but thinking about how to think about the people around me, and trying to really kind of dig into the motivations. What is my motivation in this situation? What is my data scientist's motivation? What is my business partner's motivation? And trying to kind of bring all of those things into harmony is another thing that I think has helped me.
Great, thanks. We have, on the scheduled time, we have 4 minutes left, but we might go over a little bit. We'll see what the powers that be say. We had a question in the back there. I think it was right behind you was the first one. There you go.
Hi. Question about productionizing solutions. I know this is about growing and managing a team, but do you do that internally on your team for QA and things of that nature? It's a
great question.
It's a thing I'm grappling with.
Yeah. I could take a stab at that. So I lean pretty heavily. There's kind of a spectrum, I think, of how engineering capable data scientists are. Like on one end is the like throw it over the wall model, where you throw a model over the wall and have the engineers implement it. And I think on the other end, you have data scientists who are very, very close to writing engineering level production code. And my team, I always try to lean into that side for teams. So I think what's important, like I don't hire data scientists who write perfect engineering level quality, but I hire data scientists who want to learn how to do that. And so they want to learn from the engineers about how to write unit tests and do continuous deployment and Docker, and they want to run their own API services. And maybe they haven't done any of that yet. And so we kind of build up this team expertise. And so my teams do end up deploying their own APIs and services and productionalizing code and having to monitor it and get alerted. And I find that I've always been in smaller companies, so I find that like helps you move faster and you don't get blocked on engineering resources that might not be available. So.
The bigger companies, that often ends up being federated, but I definitely agree with Michelangelo that having a team that can do it, even if they're not ending up doing it, is very important. And often, especially for younger or smaller teams, you should start out with the intent of being the one that does the production or even the end-to-end, and then kind of figure out what parts of the company around you can take over parts that they're ready to do. That has definitely worked out.
And my one piece of advice is, as the team gets bigger, start an on-call rotation. This is an idea engineering has had forever. There is no faster cure for people who want to like make poorly documented models and throw them over the wall than like their friend goes on call the next week and it breaks. And they have to try and fix it with no documentation. And suddenly, the data science team has a self-correcting mechanism for developing all the stuff you need to actually productionalize models.
And something will break the day after you go on vacation.
That's right. Like,
Yes.
and you'll be like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, my like phone is blazing because there's no documentation and the critical system is broken and I should have written that.
Yeah.
So yes, on-call rotation. Also, data scientists like it because then, if you have a team of 6, that means 5 out of 6 weeks, they're not on call. Right? Like they're not worrying about, I got an email in the middle of the day, I can't work on my current project, I got to go work on this other thing. They're like, that's an on-call problem.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Maybe time for one more?
Patrick Harrison with S&P Global. Do you all think it's important for a data science leader to spend some of their time doing hands-on keyboard data science modeling work?
We might give you different answers to that. I don't know if it's important to the company, but it's important to me to keep my sanity. So I try to spend some small amount of time doing something that's like very out of the critical path. Like, because even doing code review or writing code, like it gets blocked on me when you're in meetings nonstop, and that's not a good thing to do. Like, you shouldn't be doing anything important, but if you can identify like a small thing that's kind of orthogonal to important stuff, or maybe it's like something you're prototyping for the future, like for your own sanity, like it's why I got involved in this in the first place. So I like to have something like that, but you do have to be careful because you shouldn't be doing it too much. And there is, like, if that's how you came up, like, you have to pull yourself away, I think, from spending too much time doing that.
Yeah, I do think it's important. I agree that it's, if I'm coding on a project that a team is working on, that's usually a bad sign. Because one, the people on my team can code circles around me, and that is every team I've ever managed anywhere. So anything that I write is going to have to be rewritten before it goes to production. So that's kind of its own thing. But actually being able to do something soup to nuts is important. I probably don't do it as much as I should, but it is an important aspect of what I will say.
So I'm going to disagree a bit and agree at the same time. So what I would say is, if you are just becoming a manager, you need to allow yourself 3 to 6 months where you're just forbidden from doing IC work. And the reason is, otherwise you will never truly prioritize being a manager of people, and you'll underserve the team. You won't know what your role is. You'll be like, you'll be like, should I read this thing about what are people interested in my team, or should I, go work on this ticket, and you'll work on the ticket. So I strongly recommend just stopping initially. I made that mistake initially. It was terrible. I had to be told by a more senior manager, this is done. You are not doing this anymore for a while. But as you get more experience, I think it's fine. What I always did then is, since we had on-call rotations, I would just go to the backlog of on-call tickets, and I would peel off kind of the crappy ones that no one wanted to do. That's useful for me as a manager because I get to do stuff, but also I get to see kind of where the team is hiding the bodies today. What are the things no one wants to touch and why? And that allows me to be like, oh, we need to prioritize this tech debt, or there's a big problem here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would take non-critical requests and just do them myself and knock them out sometimes.
Great. Thank you for your questions, and please thank our panelists. Thank you.